I felt this overwhelming sense of anticipation when preparing to meet Michael about 5 years ago. It was early in the morning before work, but I couldn't think of a better way to start the day. I arrived at Barbara's office with my husband, and we sat down on her couch. Barbara was in her 70s, the perfect blend of sweet and tough, and she got right down to business. She asked how our weeks had been going, mainly focused on my husband's. And then she kindly asked if Michael would come and join us. So I looked over at my husband, and I saw his eyes close. They seemed to roll to the back of his head as it tilted back. And when they opened, he said, "Hi, I'm Michael." He seemed like a young teenager. His sitting position shifted. He was sitting as if he was in trouble. He seemed ashamed. But I felt immediate relief to see this progress in my husband's therapy since he was diagnosed with a dissociative disorder. This is a mental illness that had wreaked havoc on our lives since getting married at the age of 24. I know I should have thought it was strange meeting another personality in my husband's body, but my life had not been normal for so long, I was used to strange. You see, Michael had been taking over for years, drinking heavily, causing my husband to miss important events and appointments, making a mess out of our home, and treating me with misplaced anger. Dissociative identity disorder, DID, you may have heard of it called multiple personalities, is a condition based on trauma. These alternate personalities are created to deal with the tougher stuff in life so that the host, in this case my husband, doesn't have to. So Michael had been dealing with all of this anger and all of this shame, reliving it every single day. But here he was, apologizing for it. He told me that he loved me and that he was sorry. And I have to admit, I had been really angry at Michael. But seeing his youngness, seeing his sadness, I told him that I cared about him too, and that I would work with him to make things better. Now, he didn't stay out for long, and my husband returned much in the same way that he came. And we left the therapy appointment, and we walked back to the car, and we were silent. I think the enormity of what had just happened was settling in. Now, life was not always that difficult. I met my husband right after college, and our romance was immediate. A couple months into it, he took me on a camping trip for my birthday. And he had it all planned out, and we got to the campsite, but it was getting dark, so we didn't have time to build a fire. Then it started to rain, and typically things going off plan would have made me feel really anxious and upset, but with him, I didn't. Well, he got the tent set up, he strung a tarp over it so that it wouldn't leak, and then when it started leaking, he ran out into the rain and put duct tape on it. And we snuggled in our waterproof sleeping bag, and I felt safe. And I knew that this was the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Only we didn't know about his condition until after we were married. And several years into marriage, we still struggled with his mental illness. I mean, learning about Michael was a really important first step, but we soon realized that was not the only personality living within him. So let me take a moment to explain that there's no cure. There's no medication for DID. The only thing that you can do is go through years and years of talk therapy where the objective is to integrate. So you bring those personalities together. Each personality isn't a whole person. It's just a fragment, sort of like we all have these different parts of ourselves that come out at different times, only they're less extreme. You know, we don't forget past actions. DID is so powerful because it's based on trauma that it takes years for one person to become whole again. A few years ago, I had a rare Saturday night out with my husband. We went to a soccer game downtown, and we were walking home from the metro, and things were a little bit off. He was getting agitated, and when he would get irritable seemingly over nothing, that was usually a sign that he was going to dissociate. So when we arrived home, he actually said that he wanted to step out to the back porch. I was nervous, but I sat on the couch in the living room and waited for him. When he came back in, he stood in front of me and he said, "Hello, little darling, I'm Charlie." That was my best Southern accent, by the way. Now, I know I was supposed to be freaked out, but this was just another puzzle piece to this mystery of what was going on in my husband's mind. So Charlie walked over to the chair across from me, calmly, with resolve, sat down. His demeanor was more straightforward and strong, unlike Michael's. And he told me that he was a former soldier. And he was much older than my husband, and in fact, he had been around when my husband was a small child, and he had cared for him. He looked out for him. He protected him. Only over the years, he started to feel useless, and he fell into self-destructive behavior, the sort that Michael had fallen into. Only he recently had an epiphany. He had seen my unwavering love and dedication, and he wanted to do better. And he told me that he would. And actually, Charlie ended up becoming an incredible ally. In fact, sometimes Michael would be acting out, and I would call for Charlie to come and help us. Now, Charlie, as an older Southern gentleman, was not too keen on the idea of going to therapy, but he eventually did. And Barbara, the therapist, she told us that integration would be rapid, less than a year. And I was filled with so much hope, because really hope was the thing that brought me through year by year. And I kept anticipating progress, but things kept getting harder and harder. And in any young love, the person you marry may change, and you yourself may become a different person. Sometimes you can't get back to the love that you once had. This truth was so difficult for us to unravel, that the man that I married no longer existed, or really, I had only fallen in love with a piece of him. And I think back to being in that tent with him and hearing the rain battering down upon us, and I felt warm and protected, safe, whole, and I realized that my husband no longer could be that for me. And so I decided to end the marriage, because after 9 years and 3 personalities, I was mostly alone. And it was the hardest decision of my life. And I still love him terribly. And I want to help him still as a friend. But we each have to find separately our own manifestations of whole.